Hello, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Lauri Brouwer. I'm a naturopathic physician at Living Wellness Medical Center in Phoenix, Arizona. And today I'm going to be talking to you about resistant starch. So here's your slideshow. Okay, we're talking about resistant starch, which is a nutritional element that's found in plant foods. The information that I'm sharing with you today, a lot of it came from this particular journal. It was published in Science Direct website, the Journal of Functional Foods, talking about the health benefits of resistant starch. They did a review of a lot of various studies and condensed all the information together for us here. Starch is a nutrient, and it's a carbohydrate that is complex. And that simply means that it is multiple molecules of sugar linked together. In this case, starch is glucose plus glucose in long chains, and that makes it complex. So it takes a little bit more effort for our bodies to digest it down than would a simple sugar like glucose alone. It's an essential source of energy for the human diet. Our ancestors and folks still living on the planet today in the hunter-gatherer way eat about 16% of their diet as starch. And that is as root vegetables. Because if you think about, our ancestors and hunter-gatherers, they don't participate in agriculture. So for them, it's just root vegetables that they could harvest, that they could come across. Modern diets provide a lot more starch, generally eaten as grains, as well as root vegetables. Those, the highest number by category are potatoes, rice, wheat, maize, which is corn, and cassava. Resistant starch is a term that was coined in 1982, and we've been studying it ever since, finding lots and lots of health benefits to eating this particular type of starch. It is the portion of starch that is not digested in the small intestine. It then proceeds through to the colon, where it's fermented by the microorganisms that live there. They form short-chain fatty acids from the starch, and those short-chain fatty acids are associated with some metabolic effects and some benefits to us. So really the point of this is most starch, a lot of starch is rapidly digestible. And as soon as you eat it, immediately it's broken down into those glucose molecules and absorbed into the bloodstream rapidly. Here, it takes time as it transits through the small intestine. It's not being digested, and it gets all the way to the colon in its undigested form. Here's a nice graphic that was presented in that literature review, showing that, on the left, you can see sources of starch. These are plant foods like grains that we make into bread or we eat as porridge or cereals, beans, legumes. They've got green bananas there. That's an important one in this category. The starch that's contained in that, some of it is resistant starch. And you can see through the large intestine, it transmits through the bacteria in there, ferment the starch and turn it into short-chain fatty acids. A byproduct of that fermentation is gas production. So you may also notice that when you consume resistant starch. The effects on our bodies when the short-chain fatty acids enter our bloodstream, or actually while they're still in the large intestine, they confer a benefit for intestinal health. One of the short-chain fatty acids is the primary fuel and favorite fuel for the cells that line the intestines, called enterocytes. Also, we can see better blood sugar balance, better insulin balance. Of course, because the bacteria can ferment the resistant starch, that's considered to be a prebiotic. It's food for probiotics. Lipid metabolism balance is noted there. This helps to bring down the unhealthy cholesterol numbers that we can sometimes encounter as we age. And also body weight reduction. We can see some weight loss when we eat more resistant starch than the rapidly digested starches. Short-chain fatty acids have several benefits. And to call them out, some of these that are produced in the gut are lactic acid, could also call that lactate, acetate, propionate, and butyrate. All of these can interchangeably be called, acetate is acetic acid. Propionate is propionic acid, butyrate, butyric acid. So they all have these interchangeable names, but those are the short chain fatty acids of interest to us here. They are acidic. So they lower the pH in your intestine where they are being produced. And that acidic environment reduces the growth of pathogenic microorganisms, or, the bad bugs that we can sometimes come across. And that acidic environment also promotes the proliferation of beneficial bacteria. In particular, you may have heard of Lactobacillus acidophilus, and acidophilus means loving acid. So that's one of the healthy gut bacteria that thrive in the environment where the short chain fatty acids are plentiful. They also, short chain fatty acids can stimulate the production of GLP-1, glucagon-like peptide 1. That lowers blood sugar and increases the sense of fullness at a meal, increases satiety, which is the feeling of being satisfied after a meal. I just want to highlight for those of you who are, interested in weight loss and have used or are interested in using a GLP-1 agonist like semaglutide or Ozempic, this has the same effect. Benefits of butyrate particularly, I'm calling this out because there are so many of the benefits that we get from resistant starch is the production of butyrate. Butyrate is already found, butyric acid can be found in butter. That's sort of where the name comes from, BUT, butter. So any milk products are going to contain butyrate as well. But again, we're talking about the form of it that's made in our gut after we eat resistant starch. One of the major benefits of butyrate is it's anti-inflammatory. It can improve symptoms of diseases like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, etc. Butyrate is that short chain fatty acid I mentioned earlier that is the favorite and primary fuel of the cells that line the gut. So if they're getting more fuel, they're going to be more energized, and that can improve the barrier function of the gut. So if you've got, permeability or what we call leaky gut, butyrate is going to be a really important part of your healing process. You can get this through supplementation or, again, through eating resistant starch regularly. There's a direct diminishment of the risk of colon cancer through butyrate. It actually, it's improving the health of the cells themselves so that they're regenerating and replicating appropriately, but also directly, butyrate induces what we call a cancer cell death, which another name is apoptosis, but it directly helps to protect us against colon cancer. Increasing insulin sensitivity is very important for reducing our risk of developing diabetes, metabolic syndrome, heart disease. Even Alzheimer's can be caused by insulin resistance in the brain. So we want to increase insulin sensitivity, and butyrate is one of those things that helps us do that. It also can help protect your brain. It's been shown in some studies to help prevent stroke, depression, other brain diseases. So, plenty of this in your diet is going to be a good thing. Prevents cardiovascular disease. Again, part of that is through lowering the bad lipids, the bad cholesterols, and enhances sleep. And that's by encouraging the growth of those gut bacteria, some of whom send signals to the brain to help us become more sleepy and sleep better at night. So butyrate's a fantastic short chain fatty acid. By the way, if you're interested in knowing if your body is already producing good levels of these short chain fatty acids, stool testing is one way that we can test that for you. So just, if you're a patient at our practice and you want to know more about that, ask your doctor about doing stool testing to check your short chain fatty acid levels to see if your production is adequate. Another of the short chain fatty acids of interest for us is the propionate. This one is pretty fantastic if you're somebody who has, excessive hunger. You want to eat all the time, because propionate actually sends signals to the brain that make it feel satisfied, like you've eaten enough. So its appetite suppressing hormones come from this short chain fatty acid. And also it helps to protect us from heart disease, strokes, heart attacks by lowering our LDL and VLDL cholesterol levels. Less belly fat is going to be stored, less fat in our liver, and lower risk of atherosclerosis through consuming the resistant starch that then is turned into the propionate. Acetate, the last one I'm going to talk about in the short chain fatty acids, it is directly a fuel for the liver cells. So every time we eat something, it's processed in our intestines. The nutrients are taken from the intestines, put into the blood that goes immediate to the liver. So before any of these nutrients pass to the rest of the body, the first place they go from our intestines is into our liver. So the acetate that's produced there goes to the liver and energizes the cells. About 50 to 70% of the acetic acid produced in our intestines is used as fuel to give our liver cells energy. The rest of that acetate is out, distributed out to the bloodstream, and it's used as fuel for our active muscles. Acetate also helps to regulate the lipid and cholesterol metabolism, similar to the last one we talked about. And it is also an essential building block for creating cholesterol, which is important for every cell in our body and our brain. We want to have our cholesterol production up to speed. There was a health claim that has been approved based on some, the preponderance of evidence of the health effects. And so health claims are something, they have to have evidence behind them for manufacturers of health products or food products to be able to label something with a specific claim. So this is the claim that has been approved for resistant starch. The effect on glucose metabolism observed after resistant starch-rich food consumption was so well documented that the health claim was approved of replacing digestible starch in a meal with resistant starch helps reduce the rise in blood glucose after that meal. So if you're somebody who has problems with elevated blood sugar levels, resistant starch may be something you want to introduce to your diet. Again, I highlighted in red here because it's not just eating more of this food, it's using this type of starch as a replacement for simple starch. Okay. Weight control is one of the benefits that we get from resistant starch. It may be, based on several different mechanisms. Because it's not absorbed in the small intestine where we absorb most of our nutrients and most of our energy, producing calories. It's not absorbed in that normal site, so it bypasses absorption. It doesn't go into our bloodstream to be used as energy or calories. So again, if we replace that, a simple starch with the resistant starch, you're going to reduce your calorie intake overall. The short chain fatty acids that are produced in the large intestine can increase the total energy expenditure and improve fat burning. And resistant starch may affect the appetite suppression that I mentioned earlier through a few different chemical pathways. Again, the caveat from this review, that very large review, I showed you the first page at the beginning, that does say in the final paragraphs that the studies cited in this review, all of these studies sort of had low numbers of participants. These weren't very, very large population studies. And so we always want to throw caution, in when we're looking at studies that aren't very, very large, trying to extrapolate that to a larger population isn't the thing we want to leap to. We just want to know that further studies on larger groups of people will prove this effect, once and for all. But at least we're getting a lot of evidence that shows these benefits, strongly enough to share. There are various types of resistant starches, 5 types that are listed here. Resistant starch 1 is something, it's just by virtue of what the plant is like and what that food is like. It's starch that can't be accessed because the fibrous plant cell wall is a barrier keeping us from getting to that starch. So things like bulgur wheat, it's a very coarsely ground wheat, that kind of thing, coarsely ground grains, seeds, and legumes. If you don't know what that term means, legumes are beans, peas, and lentils. That includes peanuts. So those foods naturally contain resistant starch. So you don't have to do anything but eat those foods as they are. And resistant starch is in your diet. Starch that's not digested due to a different crystalline form. The molecule looks different. That's resistant starch 2. It's found in raw potatoes, in green or unripe bananas, and in a special kind of corn called high amylose corn. Not that you're going to find that and purchase that for yourself. It's going to be in products that you buy. But those are some starches that, again, are really great. Found in raw potatoes, generally the way that you get this is as a supplement of a raw potato powder that you add to other foods to eat. You definitely do not want to eat raw potatoes regularly, not healthy, lots of, elements in there that can cause digestive distress. Anyway, resistant starch is found in, number 2 is found in those types of foods. Number 3 is, we call it a retrograded starch. And what that means is you take something that's really starchy like rice or potatoes and you cook it, then you cool it. It forms sort of gelatin as it cools, and that is the resistant starch. So cooking and then cooling starchy foods can develop the resistant starch in them. So I always recommend, don't cook your rice or bake your potatoes and then eat them immediately while they're still hot. Do your batch cooking on the weekend for things to eat throughout the week, right? Cook a bunch of rice if that's something that's a staple of yours, oatmeal, things like that. So cook them ahead, let them cool fully. And then what's great about this is it doesn't revert back to an easily digestible form if you reheat it, right? So if you cook that rice, let it cool, reheating it for a meal is not going to change that resistant starch. It'll still be available to you. And then resistant starches number 4 and 5 are starches that have been modified in a food lab. And so you're only going to find those in commercial produced breads and pastries and things like that. But it's worth, paying attention when you buy them, if it's going to be on the label. Why do we care that there are different types of starch? Because various resistant starches can have different effects. For instance, that retrograded starch, the resistant starch number 3, it can bind bile salts, and those are things that are released from our liver into our intestines. And so if the starch in your intestines can bind those bile salts, that actually results in removing cholesterol from your body. So this is a way to lower cholesterol directly. And that's a property that RS3 has, but it's not been demonstrated in the other types of starch. So it's not, you don't want to just go for one type of resistant starch. It's better to get a variety. Just like with any other kind of, dietary fiber, variety is better. Interestingly, though, several different types of resistant starch can exist in the same food. And you can think of that, right? If you had a whole grain bread, you've got the whole grain, you've got the husk, and that's the RS1. And then you've cooked it, you've cooled it. When it was, made into bread, it was cooked and cooled, and that turns some of that starch into RS3. So in the same food, in a bread, you're getting RS1 and RS3. I already mentioned, but yeah, the resistant starch does not convert back to easily digested starch after you reheat it. So that's nice. Where can you find these wonderful things? I've mentioned a couple of things, but here are foods with each particular type. So resistant starch 1, one thing that you might be familiar with and already have in your diet would be raw overnight oats. So rather than cooking the oats, you would just soak them in some sort of dairy overnight in the refrigerator to soften them up, and you've got resistant starch 1. And otherwise, nuts, seeds, beans, I mentioned all those. Those are also RS1. So pinto beans, garbanzo beans, soybeans, any of those legumes are going to have resistant starch 1. Peas, like green peas, just field peas, lentils, any colored lentil, and then peanuts. Those are good sources. For RS2, green unripe bananas. If you enjoy the flavor of them, that's a good way to get those resistant starch type 2 in, is through the green bananas. That's really the only kind of food that you would eat with that in it. Cooked and cooled rice would provide that number 3. Same thing with cooked and cooled potatoes. Same thing with sweet potatoes. Any starchy vegetable that's cooked and then cooled, you're going to get some of the RS3 in it. And grains, right? Cooked bread, corn tortillas, polenta, again, grains that are cooked, then cooled, and it gelatinized, creating that resistant starch. Food additives, of course, there are supplements on the market to give us resistant starch if it's not something that we can fit into our diet, or maybe you're somebody who doesn't cook at home a lot. You don't have control over what's going into your foods as much. So this is something we can use supplementally to get some of the resistant starches in on a daily basis. You would add them to something that's cold, like a smoothie or yogurt or oatmeal. After it's cooled, then you would add the resistant starch. So raw potato starch is something you can readily find. I'm going to recommend a particular product here on the next slide or two. But when you do add that, again, don't heat it. Don't put it in the food and then cook it. It needs to be added later. And again, I'm just cautioning you, do not eat raw potatoes. They have alkaloids that will make you sick. So generally, it's not something you want to just get through diet. There is another food additive or supplement. It's called high maize starch, also called waxy maize. You can find, bags of that in powder form online that you could use as a supplement. It's made from corn. That's what maize is. And I looked for products that might contain this. The only one I could find on our FullScript website, which is, our online dispensary, was in the standard process glucose assist. So there's a lot more things in that product than just the waxy maize, but it does contain that. If you're somebody who's looking for help with your blood sugar levels, this is an all-in-one product for that. Where to find the resistant starch for? Again, it's in commercial foods, packaged foods, and there are certain brand names. Again, you can look on the labels to see. It may say high maize, crystalline, Novolose, Fibersim, Nutrios, and it can be in products that are ready-made, or it can be in flour blends, right? If you use alternative flours other than wheat flour, you may find the high maize in there. You may see also the label say high amylose maize resistant starch. Those are just things to look for if you're trying to get this into your diet more. You also may look for things that are marketed as a prebiotic, because again, when that starch goes all the way through the small intestine unabsorbed and gets to the large intestine, now it's food or fuel for our probiotic bacteria, and we call that a prebiotic. So look for things that are marketed as prebiotics to see if they contain these resistant starches. Brand names, again, these are some of the brand names of resistant starch products that are manufactured, that are ingredients available for use in products. And I found the Fibersol in our Da Vinci Clearly Fiber product. So that's the source of that one. Nutrios is in Designs for Health, Paleo Fiber RS. And the others, this one was noted in the study that Novolose 3490 is safe for use in SIBO, which is really important to know because this is a fermentable carbohydrate. If you have SIBO, it may cause you some symptoms, but the Novolose is one that's supposed to be safe for SIBO, but I could not find a product that's in. But let's keep our eyes open. We'll see what comes through the marketplace. Recommended dietary allowance for this sort of starch, resistant starch, there is no formal recommendation. But in the various studies that were cited in that big review, they received somewhere between 10 and 60 grams per day. Those were the study amounts that were used. A daily intake of at least 20 grams is where health benefits were seen. And you can go as high as 45 grams and still be considered safe and not cause, safe or unsafe would be based on your GI gripes. It might cause you to be gassy or crampy if you get too much of it. In just a study of what Americans eat, they found that Americans get about 5 grams each day of resistant starch, very, very low amount. Europeans, similar range, Australians, maybe slightly more. But in a typical Western diet, resistant starch is very low. On the other hand, the average daily intake for Chinese people is 15 and South Africans 38. Again, that's through cassava and rice. But those populations generally healthier, some fewer lifestyle diseases. And I always wondered, how can Chinese people eat so much rice and not have problems with blood sugar and diabetes? And it's because a lot of the rice that they're eating is in this resistant starch form. Okay, so there is no recommended dietary allowance, but we want to aim for at least 20 grams. There's some more information on this side. The dosing they found for particular benefits in the studies, somewhere between 6 and 12 grams a day in a meal, could lower the blood sugar after that meal and also lower the insulin levels, which is really good. And then 15 to 20 grams a day was reported necessary to actually improve insulin sensitivity. So if you already have a problem with insulin sensitivity, you're starting to see some insulin resistance, you definitely want to go on the higher end of that and not try to make do with just, 10 grams a day. You want more. Also, the research showed that it took some time. 8 weeks of 28 grams per day was shown to be the most beneficial in this particular study here. So I would aim for, if I were you, somewhere around 20 to 30 grams a day. These are my recommendations. Just eat a wide variety of plant foods in your diet. Include those that have the resistant starch 1 that are readily available. The foods don't have to be modified in any way. They already contain the resistant starch. So legumes, peanuts, peanut butter, you can always, add those to soups, to casseroles. They're easy to sneak into salads. So, try and increase that. And I would say, a serving size of legumes would be, half a cup to a cup a day would be a good amount to work up to. If you don't eat that already, start very low. Start with a couple tablespoons or a quarter cup and work your way up. But eat, some kind of beans, peas, nuts every day. Seeds, there are some really great seeds that provide this benefit. Sunflower seeds, pumpkin, flax, quinoa, which a lot of people think of as a grain, but it is a seed. So all of these, just include these, again, plentifully. Put them in a quarter cup a day, 2 tablespoons to a quarter cup a day of those sorts of seeds. The product that I like to give us that resistant starch number 4 is the Paleo Fiber RS from Designs for Health. Each scoop is 10 grams a day, so I would recommend 1 or 2 scoops a day, depending on what the rest of your diet is like. I love that product because you're getting 2 different forms of resistant starch in it. And then it's easy for us to boost up, starch 1 with just eating beans and seeds, and resistant starch 3 by cooking and cooling foods that we prepare for ourselves. Some of those things, just to give you ideas of what you can do with cooked and cooled grains would be, you can make rice pudding or just eat leftovers. Having porridge or oatmeal tabbouleh, right? Because that is a very coarse wheat that's been cooked and presented just as a simple salad. Potato salad, leftover potatoes, leftover mashed potatoes, those sorts of things. So there are a lot of ways to get this nutrient in. Again, using it as a substitution for other more simple carbohydrates or more simple starches would be the recommendation, not adding it to your diet, but using it as a replacement for other, foods that are going to provide calories where these won't. Okay, that is my presentation. And if anybody has any questions, you can raise your hand and pop in and I'll answer them for you. Otherwise, I will provide a handout. We'll post that on our website and share it to the participants today. Just a handout to give you some information on, again, the products that I like the best. I'll show you a photo of that one, just so you can see the Designs for Health Paleo Fiber that I like. If you're a patient and you're already set up with a FullScript account, you can certainly go purchase it on there. This is the one, the Paleo Fiber RS. That's what it looks like. And we do carry that at our office as well. So if you wanted to stop by and get it anytime, feel free. I'm seeing one question popping up. Can you eat more mashed potatoes? Yes, do. But, cook them, cool them. Silly. Yeah, I can make your mashed potato pancakes out of it the next day. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed the talk and you've learned something about resistant starch, the benefits of it if you're struggling with your weight, with your cholesterol, with, blood sugar levels, insulin sensitivity. This is a great place to start that's, really easy and simple. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Take care.